Moses Brown waived by the Pacers. Some cap parts of this, and maybe December 15th is approaching. Some trade parts to this. What's up with the Pacers now, and what do the rumors say could be coming? Lots to talk about on the roster front on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, roster stuff abound. First time of the season since it started, really, besides the signing of Moses Brown, that we're going to do an exclusive roster topics episode. Moses Brown got waived on Monday. By the time this episode comes out, will be the day he could clear waivers. What does it mean for the Pacers that they did this? Why did they do it now? What can they now do? And part of the answer to that question is related to an upcoming day, December 15th on the calendar. What does that mean for the Pacers? Some players can be traded that day who previously couldn't before. Can the Pacers do anything about it? Who can be traded for them now? And then at the end, we'll do the rumor game. Shams Charania, Michael Scotto giving us some stuff recently. We'll break it all down. But we start with the news of the week as the Pacers transform their roster even more. Moses Brown has been waived by the Pacers. A very short stint for him. November 20th-ish to about December 9th. Barely made it 2 weeks. Not even really. If you count the waiver 2 days that he's currently going through, it's about exactly 2 weeks that 3 weeks that he spent with the Pacers. The signs of basketball reasons for this for me came a couple games ago, but really was cemented against Charlotte when Nick Richards was on the floor. Myles Turner committed his third foul early in the second quarter, and instead of turning to Moses Brown then and having a center in there against another center, Enrique Freeman came on the floor. That was a sign to me, and they've gone to Freeman in Brooklyn and Toronto that they maybe value other skills or speed things over what Brown could provide. He played a total since the Toronto game, and even including Toronto, where most of that time came late. He was -7 in 3 minutes against Toronto. He played 25 total seconds after that game. In fact, he hadn't even reached 6 total minutes since that Detroit game right after Thanksgiving. So obviously that Wizards game, like, they have one less win without Moses Brown this year. He started that game off for them. Great, was huge, +5 that night. You know, he had a nice night against the Pelicans in a game they barely won. Like, he had some nice peaks, but the limits of a ground-bound kind of player who, you know, is a great rebounder, but your team doesn't force a lot of misses to get rebounds. It was just not necessarily the perfect fit, and so I got why he made sense as a guy for them to get. I still think they need a backup center. He wasn't the one, and that's why I said if they do sign somebody, expect them to have a non-guaranteed contract. In this case, a 2-year non-guaranteed deal, because if it doesn't work out, great. The contract's not guaranteed until early January. They can keep wiggling around to try to maximize their flexibility, because that's another key part of this is the when, right? The why was kind of obvious. He wasn't playing well enough, right? If he obviously ends his Pacers tenure with 65% shooting from the field. That sounds great. He had 3 games, right? The Houston game, which was garbage time, where he went 3 for 4. The Wizards game and Pelicans games, in which he was good, to be clear, where he went 6 for 8 and 3 for 4. So all those games he shot exactly 75% from the field, right? And that is 12 made shots on 16 attempts. The rest of his entire tenure with the Pacers, he made 1 basket, right? He only made 1 other basket. So a lot of his percentages are really buoyed by 3 games, and that's great. He was good in those 3 games. I'm not saying they don't count, but it didn't stretch across enough performances. They didn't trust him enough. Or in games where they did have him in the rotation, even if just for a few minutes in the first half, they rarely went back to him, right? The basketball part, I totally get it. I think some of the stats come from his big minute games. He got him a win. He played in the rotation in 2 for a team looking for wins. That, I suppose, was successful, but I would say not a good fit. And it made sense to move on. The timing, of course, matters a great deal, right? They played Sunday. He didn't play that game. And that should have been a sign, because this week they don't play till Friday, and then they play Sunday, and Sunday is the 15th, which we'll talk about in this second segment here in a second, and why that's an important date that I've been watching in general for the Pacers. But they don't play for 4 days, from really 5, from Monday to Friday for the Pacers until they play the Sixers. And so every day Moses Brown was on the team, and this is really true for every player, but for minimum guys, it's a little different. Like his cap hit was going up, right? And so if they didn't think they were going to play him anymore, and they had 4 days without games where they were like, well, our centers can get healthier and like we don't need him to play games, that like he's just eating cap hits for 4 days. So if they could waive him and then get someone else, maybe not instantly, but soon after, he clears waivers, they could save a little bit of money for a guy that they already weren't playing, right? So the fact they could have a gap of 4 days, I think helps them from a financial perspective. And I think December 15th matters a lot too, which again, we will get to in the second segment. So that timing of the week off, allowing them to breathe a little helps. The other part of this is the proximity to the tax makes this timing very important for the Pacers as well, because again, every day he was chewing up, a certain amount of money. And so his cap hit comes in just over $300,000. And right as of now, after this waiver, the Pacers, I have them with no other waiver trades the rest of the way at $2.214 million under the tax, which is appropriately more than a 2 years of service veterans minimum, meaning they could still get a player and squeeze them in on a minimum deal. That is also, they could also bring that player in Isaiah Jackson's trade exception, or disabled player exception. If they'd be about 3,000 short there and be under the tax, but that would be a silly use of resources to me. They could just bring in a minimum player anyway. So the fact that it's bigger than the minimum, that distance really matters. And had they even waited just a few more days, right, they would not have been able to do that. And let's just say that gap gets bigger and smaller or whatever, like pretend they're going to convert Enrique Freeman's contract perhaps at some point this season, or Tristan Newton's, or whoever, or they're going to sign someone to a 10-day or whatever, right? Having that extra gap is important because that increases the chances you're able to do something like that when the time comes. That's what flexibility really is for any team, including the Pacers. So if they knew they were going to do it and they had 4 days off and they wanted to maximize their flexibility to potentially do something else, waiving Moses Brown as early as possible once they ID'd he wasn't the guy, which who knows when that actually was. But again, this game that they just played where they turned to other guys over him seems like the right time to do it, right? And so that's where the Pacers are. They have moved on from Moses Brown, and now they don't have a third center. I think that is the biggest part of this. I guess you could say Moses Brown was their second center, really. But Toppin playing better, I think, made this a little more feasible for them. He's had a nice last week or week plus, really, for this Pacers team, putting the ball in the basket as their tempo, even though they're still not playing well, their tempo has looked a little better, and the bench has looked pretty sharp pretty much every game the last week. Toppin's played a lot better. That's helped that bench group look good and helped Toppin look good and made him a more viable option as the backup five. And their ability to just go with Freeman as a 5 or a 4, I don't think they did that very often before the Brooklyn game last week where they were willing to turn to Enrique Freeman as a 4, but that also gives them more front court options in terms of the pairings and how often they're playing a center that's not Myles Turner or Moses Brown. I think that's really helped them, and he's done fine in those minutes. Still a little bit for him to work through with his size, right, at only 6'7"-ish, but the hustle's there. And then even in the last game they just played against Charlotte, and some of this is that one's a star player and one of them was playing well, but they finally turned to Jarris Walker and Siakam together, which is very rare. I talked about that a lot when I was running through, front court combos the Pacers could approach after the Isaiah Jackson injury, and they hadn't really gone to that in the past, but I wonder if they would, and they did against Charlotte. So with that evolution, with Freeman's involvement, with Toppin playing better, with the gap of time before games, with now the option of potentially adding a player and still being under the tax, with this trade date coming up, which we'll explain here in the second segment, a lot of factors just pointed right at this being the right decision for the Pacers to do. You YouTube watchers got to watch me make a fun noise and movement of everything pointing at one thing, but that's why the Pacers waived Moses Brown. He just, and quite frankly, it boils down to he didn't play good enough, right? Within their style and what they needed, he did not do it enough, or they would have played him and paid him, and that didn't end up happening. So the backup center spot still a question mark for the Pacers, and that will come up later pretty much immediately in every segment. It's a big part of their strategy moving forward. What else is relevant about this move at the timing? Because December 15th, everyone's favorite date to talk about for some reason, is sneaking up, and it is actually a big calendar date. for the Pacers this year come Sunday. What actually does that mean? What happens? And what does it mean the Pacers can do that now matters? We'll get to that here in just a second. Before we do so, though, we have to talk about two awesome groups of people. First up, the good folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action and get in on the NBA hoops with FanDuel and Sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 on FanDuel and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats from the action. You can view live play-by-play and see so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet on FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's also talk about Mint Mobile, because with big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get somewhere between the store and your first month's bill. The price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you don't have to worry about the gotchas. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you. They have all their plans come with high-speed data on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone, bring over your number and existing contacts, and ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower above 40 gigs on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Hop on over with your second listen to Locked On Bucks, the Eastern Conference winner of the first NBA Cup game. They're headed to Vegas again. Congrats to them. The only team from last year's Vegas trip going again will be the Milwaukee Bucks. Great game with the Magic. Awesome. That one was fun. Let's talk about the Sunday, December 15th. That is a big day in the NBA. Teams, are obviously always canvassing what they could do. Players who signed as free agents, though, in the summer, most of them can be traded starting on the 15th. Now, not all of them. If you re-signed with your former team using early bird or bird rights and got a 20% raise, then you can't be traded till January 15th. And that's relevant because that happened to Obi Toppin. Obi Toppin walked right through that exact situation, and he can't be traded till January 15th. But on December 15th, lots of players around the NBA are immediately eligible to be traded. For the Pacers, there's 3. Pascal Siakam, which is why I mentioned those rules that I just said for Toppin, because Siakam re-signed with his old team using bird rights, but did not get a big enough raise to be ineligible here. So he is eligible to be traded starting December 15th. He won't be, but he's eligible to be. James Wiseman is eligible to be traded starting on Sunday. And James Johnson, the Jameses, both of them. So guys who re-signed with the Pacers this past summer, under those circumstances, are eligible to be traded. And so are tons of guys. Hoops Rumors does a great job getting the list. Like, every team has multiple players. The Mavs have 4. The Nuggets have 4. The Clippers have 6, right? The 76ers, because they had a crazy summer, have 8, right? A lot of players and a lot of stuff becomes possible on Sunday. And so for the Pacers, who are desperate for a backup center, not maybe desperate, but really could use a backup center, having more options to get them that isn't just the free agent market is helpful, right? Like, Moses Brown was fine, I think, for a guy available a month into the season who's not on a roster, but there's a reason he was unavailable. And so players actually on a team are just better, right? So I think that helps quite a bit in sorting out, the available options to the Pacers of like quality backup 5s that they can trust almost every night, if not actually every night. They liked to play a backup center last year, all year. They only turned to Toppin once playoff time came around, and the Bucks were not playing a backup center. They were playing Bobby Portis, right? Lots of teams in the NBA do play backup centers, and the Pacers haven't been able to do so. So lots of guys become available. We'll talk about them, some of them, in a second. The other flip side of this is for the Pacers, who are very tax-strapped and can try to free money in any way they can, James Wiseman becomes trade eligible. And obviously nobody wants that contract now. He's out for the year. I mean, it's partially guaranteed next year, but he's not going to be the same player next year. Like when I talked to Jaleel Okafor about his Achilles thing, it said it took him forever to, like, he got healthy and could play, but it took me way even longer than that to feel like himself after returning, right? So the value of James Wiseman's not a neutral value deal as constructed, right? To take on his money, which is guaranteed for the rest of the season, a team would have to probably be incentivized unless they were getting some sort of financial savings in the deal. So, yes, it's possible for James Wiseman to be traded. And I do think there's ways for the Pacers to trade his contract with, a second-round pick that they don't particularly value and get something back that they maybe do value, or just get off that money completely and have a little more wiggle room under the tax to make different trades or bring in other players. So I think that's relevant. I think that's something to keep an eye on, right? Is can they dump James Wiseman on someone else? Here's the problem with that. If you're another team and you agree, like, yeah, we would take James Wiseman for the price the Pacers are currently offering, or we would agree to that thing, that's not something you'd want to do on December 15th. That's something you'd want to do on the trade deadline, because you don't want to give up some space or give up some flexibility before the deadline, just in case, right? So that is something that's now available to the Pacers. And like, I've come up with this goofy Cody Zeller, who's never reported to the Hawks, for James Wiseman structure for forever, because the Hawks need that money savings. But why would they do that right now, for example? Or why would they do that at all? Because Wiseman can't play for them, and the Pacers could really use Cody Zeller. So, that's just like a concept of something that wasn't possible that now is, right, on this day. So that's part one for the Pacers, is they are now actually able to trade James Wiseman and James Johnson, who is valueless in trades, and Siakam, who they won't trade. But either way, you get the gist of what I'm saying. A lot opens up. So the thing I want to go through a list of, I'm not going to suggest fake trades. I'm not going to say anybody specifically, but I want to go through a list of guys who are trade eligible that are, in theory, backup centers that make a small enough amount of money. Like Cody Zeller makes a little too much, but that's why Wiseman's in the deal. That are like, just remember this name. Like Luke Cornett makes the veterans minimum. There's no way the Celtics would trade him, but still. Taj Gibson makes the veterans minimum in Charlotte. He's been their backup five for much of the season. Tristan Thompson makes the veterans minimum in Cleveland. Very good vet there. Don't know why they don't want to get rid of him, but these are some names that are now on the market. Pacers could trade for them legally and still deduct the tax, if I'm saying their name. Mo Bamba with the Clippers. Goofy situation because he's been hurt all year, but still is reality. Thomas Bryant, ex-IU guy with the Heat. We're going to talk about him again in the third segment. You'll see why when we get there. But the Heat are a very interesting team in the next 3 months or so to me, as you saw with Shams Charania reporting that Jimmy Butler could be available. We're not going to talk about that today, but we could get to that at some point. We'll see. But there's plenty more. Daniel Tyson, ex-Pacer, he's now available to be traded and makes the minimum. Couple other guys, that Mason Plumlee, Alex Len, and Orlando Robinson in Sacramento. We'll get to those guys in the third segment, and I'll explain why when we get there. All sorts of stuff is now possible. All sorts of trades are now on the market. And so for the Pacers, this is a big moment, right? Because they actually need to consider trades earlier than normal, right? I usually don't really dive into the trade deadline until February-ish. I like to get to January 15th, when everybody basically who can be traded for a season can be, because then you just really get the feel of what every team's going to do and what direction teams are going. And I still kind of want to get that with this season for the Pacers, although I think everybody kind of is set on what the season is and what the future could be. But you'll really know on January 15th what reality is for the Pacers and what they need to be thinking about. So last year in December, the OG Anunoby trade happened at the end of the month, right? Nothing really happened right on the 15th from a trade perspective. But like once this stuff gets going, that's when the 15th is the day that really can come all together. The Grant Williams trade was like the last trade of the offseason, and there really wasn't anything until December, right? It's just kind of how the cookies crumble. So this is a deadline that matters for the Pacers. They might have to think about backup center trades early. And that's not just my opinion. Reporting says this is true too. Shams Charania, Michael Scotto with some Pacers rumors. I'm going to make put some names on this, and I just named a few of them and why I think they're names for you to watch for the Pacers on the trade front. Before we get to any of that, though, we need to talk about the great people over at Game Time, the best way to get tickets to the sports, music, theater, comedy, whatever you're going to near you, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. They filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. If you do, though, Game Time is the best place to do that. They have curated deals. They have super deals. They have seat views in the venue before you buy. They have their lowest price guarantee. They have event cancellation protection, job loss protection. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets, right? Everything you'd want to know along the way, they've got it on there. And when you take that guesswork out, you download the Game Time app, you create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA when you check out. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Or second listen, Locked On Thunder. They don't have Chet Holmgren. They're still steamrolling the Dallas Mavericks. Not steamrolling. It was kind of close for a little bit there. On their way to Vegas, the NBA Cup. I love it. Two teams have punched their ticket. Listen to Locked On Thunder for more on OKC advancing. Let's talk some rumors or some stuff that's hit the rumor mill in the last, let's say, week or so regarding the Pacers and what I think about it or what I think it could mean. One I've already referenced like a million times, and now I'm actually going to run through it. Shams Charania put out his first inside pass with trade intel of the season on Wednesday. So perfect timing for me to do this because I thought this was all going to be a Michael Scotto thing. I will read it verbatim. Indiana Pacers, quote, after losing centers James Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson to Achilles tendon tears, the Pacers are actively pursuing a backup five, sources said. That makes sense because they already did pursue a backup five once in Moses Brown, and they just cut him. They're still probably doing so. They need one very badly. They do not have size at the position. They are screwed if Myles gets hurt. They're screwed if foul trouble happens like it did against the Hornets 3 days ago. Excuse me. What is on the market, right? There's the same free agents we already ran through when we did the free agency thing. I'm going to name every player, not every player. I'm going to name most of the players that make the vet minimum or less, the 2 years of service, vet minimum or less, and is a center. I'm just going to name the names. I'm not saying all these guys are good names for the Pacers. Just bear with me, okay? Charles Bassey in San Antonio, Alex Len in Sacramento, Mason Plumlee in Phoenix, Daniel Tice in New Orleans, Thomas Bryant in Miami, Mo Bamba in Los Angeles, DeAndre Jordan in Denver, Tristan Thompson in Cleveland, Luke Cornett in Boston, Orlando Robinson in Sacramento, Taj Gibson in Charlotte, Dwap Reith in Portland, Jalen Williams in OKC, Trace Jackson Davis in Golden State, and Carlo Matkovic in New Orleans. So let's cut out a few of those right away. Trace Jackson Davis, never going to happen. He's probably too good for the worst to give him up. Jay Will, same thing. Matkovic, you guys don't know very well. He's kind of raw, but he's been playing pretty well for New Orleans. Taj Gibson, Luke Cornett, Tristan Thompson, DeAndre Jordan, they're kind of just like sage vets for their team. Luke Cornett's actually good and plays. Don't know why the Celtics would trade him. Mo Bamba's been hurt and never plays. Daniel Tice is a starter on a team that needs him, although maybe they don't need him. Mason Plumlee is a maybe. So Mason Plumlee, I suppose, is kind of on the fringe, although the Suns kind of could use him too. The guys on this list that are either they're kind of good but don't play, or they overlap with someone else on their team, a.k.a. the guys I think could be the most available of this list in terms of if they're going to be traded, would be Charles Bassey, who, when Zach Collins and Victor Wembanyama are available, is not really in the rotation, although he's been playing much more for the San Antonio Spurs recently. But Charles Bassey, Orlando Robinson / Alex Len, whichever one of them happens to not be playing for the Sacramento Kings at the time. I like both those players on minimum salaries. Thomas Bryant with the Miami Heat. I suppose Tice or Plumlee, but not. I don't feel as good about that. And Dwap Reith with Portland are the names that stand out to me as like something about their situation makes them somewhat plausible trade candidates to me, right? So what exactly is it about those guys and their situation, right? So the Spurs spending is whatever. Charles Bassey doesn't really play that much. They just kind of are in asset mode. Maybe they don't want to trade him, whatever. The Kings, one of Alex Len or Orlando Robinson just isn't playing, and they're close to the luxury tax. They're very close, right? Behind Sabonis. Maybe you want 3 centers if you're the Kings, but if they're willing to trim one off, one of Orlando Robinson or Alex Len could be a name that makes sense in terms of the Pacers could afford them under the tax and they're like good and interesting. Portland is the same way. Portland has too many centers. One of or two of them are not playing. They have Robert Williams. They have DeAndre Ayton. They have Donovan Clingan. And they have Dwap, who I like Dwap. He was a good rookie last year, even though he's much older than your typical rookie. He's just not playing at all for the Blazers this year because they have all those other centers that I said. But 6'11", he was good in the Olympics for South Sudan. He shot threes well last year and took them at volume. He's shooting decently well this year. He's only playing 13 games, though, 6 minutes a game. So he seems like he could be available, and Portland is also pretty close to luxury tax. Getting some flexibility could be nice. And then the Heat with Thomas Bryant. This one's really interesting to me, not because Thomas Bryant isn't good or doesn't play, although he doesn't play that much. They have Kevin Love. They have Bam Adebayo. They have other bigs. They have Khalil Ware waiting in the wings, right? Thomas Bryant is on that team on the minimum, and he doesn't play that much. 10 games played this season. I think he's been hurt a few times. But either way, they are over the tax. If they could get rid of Thomas Bryant, they'd be thrilled. They could save quite a bit of money, I'd imagine, I suppose. I don't know that he would be thrilled to just lose a player because Thomas Bryant, he did miss a big chunk of the middle of the season. He was actually their backup 5 to start the season. He's been playing more again recently. But if they believe in their bigs behind him, the amount of savings they could get from that do make sense to me as an option. So I don't know what the Pacers are totally thinking in terms of who the backup 5s are that they like on the market. And that's just the minimum guys, right? They obviously could get someone who makes more money if they send out the salary to make it possible. Everyone's going to say, they could just spend to the tax. They should spend to the tax. Yeah, okay. One, they're never going to if they're not good this year. That doesn't make any sense. And two, if they're really only willing to start the repeater tax timeline, if they're actually good, they're definitely not going to do it this year. So those are names to keep an eye on. But if they're willing to send out money, then you can up that band. But those are just names that I would bang around in your head for a little bit, given what Shams said about the Pacers pursuing backup 5s. We'll see if anything makes any sense there. But try to find always, when you're looking for potential acquisitions for the Pacers, not just good players, although good players are important, but players who are good, and there's a reason their team would be willing to get rid of them. I think people skip that step a lot. The other thing, Mike Scotto went crazy, man. He was reporting machine with his potential trade candidates for all 30 teams to kick off December kind of thing. He nailed the pulse of the Pacers, heard him asking questions in Brooklyn to the team last week. Love Scotto. He's awesome. Few blend reporting and insider efforts like he does. He wrote a lot of stuff about some Pacers rumors stuff. One is Myles Turner's in the final year of his $19.93 million contract, and teams across the league have always coveted him from afar. The belief is Indiana wants to re-sign him. Yes, I believe that to be true as well because of his bird right situation, because him and Tyrese Haliburton, despite the Pacers struggle, still have a pretty good per possession pick and roll combo this year. Tyrese Haliburton talked about being a part of more Myles Turner I can't accolades, whatever, when he crossed the rebound and blocks totals earlier this season. Obviously, if the Pacers continue to not play well, they have to think about Turner's future in a different way, and he hasn't played as well this season, right? So there's obviously a lot of layers to that, but if he gets back to last year at all, or the Pacers do, keeping him would make sense. But as of right now, I don't know if that makes as much sense. The two players that Scotto identified as potentially the top 2 trade candidates for the Pacers here were Obi Toppin and Jarris Walker, both being behind Pascal, Siakam, and the rotation matters there. Toppin's a new contract, and how other teams view Jarris Walker, right? But now he's getting consistent playing time. It's a little different. So that's some of the stuff that Scotto had in there. The other thing at the end was he wrote, quote, rookie forward two-way contract Enrique Freeman is a name to watch as a standard NBA contract conversion candidate after the trade deadline. League sources told Hoops Hype. That makes a lot of sense to me. They have an open roster spot and enough wiggle room to do so. You always want to have contracts that could be, tiny or lightly guaranteed or whatever, especially if the player's good. And they seem to like Freeman. He plays in key moments. He hustles really hard. Again, his height is very much a limiting factor, but I totally get why that would be the case. Highly recommend you check out Scotto's entire piece. There's a ton of good little nuggets in there, like how teams have been interested in TJ McConnell in the past, which is fine and great, but he can't be traded this year, or how teams have been interested in Ben Mathurin in the past, right? So check that out. Check out Shams' Inside Pass to get more of this stuff. But that is the Pacers inclusions we have seen so far. That's their reality. That's the trade stuff they have to consider. About a month from now, January 15th, we'll get into the weeds. What direction should the Pacers go? Unless they get named in anything more specific. Any stars they could pursue, all sorts of that stuff. all the juicy stuff that people really like. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show and learned something about the Cap stuff, about the Pacers' reality, about what they could do, players that make sense for them. If you have any questions, I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. East, and this podcast is there on Twitter at Locked On Pacers. Back tomorrow, doing a mailbag. Ask me some questions. I'm happy to answer them. And yes, now is a good time to submit them. Thank you all for listening today. Have a great day. We'll see you very soon.